here to talk about AI, and in particular, generative AI. Now, I think that we are on the cusp of a new stage in machine-human evolution that's profoundly going to change the way that we work, and we've already been hearing about some of that today, the way we live, and it's even going to impact our very perception of what it means to be human. I call it the era of generative AI. The last few months and weeks, the soundtrack
AI, generative AI, generative AI, generative AI, AI as AI, AI. It uses AI to bring AI.
And that's the end of my speech, right? AI, generative AI. That's kind of been the soundtrack of our mind for the past few months and weeks. But what is this thing in particular, this generative AI? And broadly speaking, of course, AI has been in our lives for a long time, but generative AI you can kind of conceive of as a new type of AI. The advances that are leading to generative AI are thanks to deep learning advances that are less than 10 years old. And it's different from traditional AI or discriminatory AI because it's more than about labeling or categorizing data. The clue is in the name. Generative AI is about generating or creating new data. And it's really only last year, in 2022, that generative AI kind of became the catch-all phrase for the huge advances in AI that we're starting to see now. Now, people don't normally associate generative AI and ChatGPT to deepfakes. But this is really where the story begins. And just by show of hands, who's heard of deepfakes? I'm assuming is there anybody okay. Everybody's heard of deepfakes. This is really where the story begins. And it's where the story begins for me when, at the end of 2017, when some of these amazing research capabilities were starting to leak, this capacity of AI to generate or create new things, people started using these tools and capabilities to make memes like this, so-called kind of face swaps. So they use AI to generate this synthetic content, which is a mashup of two faces. In this case, it's the actor, Nicolas Cage, and he was a keen kind of face swap meme in the early days because he's obviously such a legend, mashed up with Clinton, right? Here you have him as Mr. Trump, right? This is the kind of stuff you were seeing in 2017. And here you have him as Yoda. Now, of course, when deepfakes started emerging in 2017, it wasn't only memes that people were making. They were also making AI-assisted pornography. Because, of course, that was the very first thing that people started doing when this amazing new capability started emerging. So just like the internet, pornography in the case of AI and generative AI has been pioneering. But, of course, I'm not going to show you any of that here. Now, come 2021, the creative capabilities, generative abilities of generative AI were really starting to accelerate. And this is the kind of thing we were seeing by 2021. You might have heard of Deep Tom.
If you're a pretty good climber, I want to see you climb this. Not easy to do, but with discipline and hard work. I don't know what I'm talking about. It's crazy!
So Deep Tom started going viral on TikTok in 2021, and of course this was astounding, right? Because it looked so much like Tom Cruise, but it was actually one guy, one kind of deepfake creator who had a background in VFX, who was making these videos. And this was unparalleled, because until this point, to create something like that would have required a team of very skilled VFX artists, a multi-million-dollar budget, and this was one guy creating Deep Tom. Now he's got a very successful generative AI creative company in Hollywood. So from 2017 to 2021, we're starting to see deepfakes, and you're starting to see AI creating creative content. But again, the conversation really started to change in the last 12 months. Why? Because you started seeing coming to the fore these so-called foundational models. And this is a league above, somebody using like a creative tool to make a deep fake, or even somebody making kind of a Tom Cruise clone on TikTok. And the difference with these foundational models is that they were trained on huge, huge data sets. You can almost understand it as being all of the internet. And unlike kind of the deep fakes we saw, these were general purpose, right? They're not task specific. These foundational models could be used to do far more than one thing, and because as Stelios already described, they inherently had this capability to process and understand natural language. You had this interface where a human can control them via a text prompt. And in the past 12 months, these are some of the foundational models that have emerged that have completely changed the conversation. All of these foundational models are text-to-image generators. So you prompt the model what you want it to generate, and then it generates any image based on that prompt. So Midjourney, OpenAI's DALL-E 2, Stable Diffusion from Stability AI, all of them have come out basically in the last 12 months. Now, the first foundational model that came out, which was text-to-image, was OpenAI's DALL-E 2. But Stable Diffusion was really the one that kind of kicked off the AI arms race, if you will. It was released by the British AI company, Stability AI. It's actually an open source project. And the reason why it kicked off the AI arms race was because it was the first foundational model that was released open source. But here, we're kind of familiar with this kind of thing now, but remember, this was only in August. So when this capability came out that you could put a prompt like this, ultra-realistic, Native American old woman, a portrait, cinematic lighting, 80mm lens. And that's what is created, in August last year. That was still absolutely mind-blowing. Now again, the reason why this model was so important is because it was the first foundational model that was released with no guardrails, released open source, and that was a watershed moment, in my view, in the history of generative AI. And again, this only came out in August last year. But of course, how can we talk about generative AI without talking about large language models, right? LLMs, and in particular, ChatGPT. Now, these are generative models, foundational models that have the capability of generating, interpreting, and creating text. Now, with the release of Stable Diffusion in August, which was such a hit that millions of people were already playing with it within a matter of weeks and months, I have no doubt that that is one of the reasons why OpenAI decided to release ChatGPT. It's not open source, but its very design was that people would be using it, right? Until this moment, OpenAI had been creating a lot of foundational models and a lot of advances, but they had kind of closely monitored things and kept them behind guardrails. ChatGPT was designed for people to use, and I made a prediction at the end of last year that 2023 was going to be the year of mass adoption for generative AI. I said that hundreds of millions of people would be interfacing with generative AI by this year. And when I made that prediction at the end of last year, people were like, yeah, okay, that's a bit ridiculous. But that came through ChatGPT alone, okay? So it is the most popular piece, it is the most popular application of all time. To show you how popular it is, check out this graph. It took Twitter 2 years to reach 1 million users. It took Facebook 10 months, and it took ChatGPT 5 days. 5 days to 1 million users. And within 60 days, 2 months, 100 million users. So my prediction that hundreds of millions of people would be interfacing with generative AI by 2023 came true in 2 months through ChatGPT alone. And remember, ChatGPT is only one application of one type of generative model, right? A generative model that works with text, but as I already displayed, generative models encompass every piece of digital information or format, images, audio, video, text, you name it. Every piece of digital content and information can be generated now by artificial intelligence. Which is why I made this prediction, again, last year, that by 2025, up to 90% of content online will be generated by AI. And I think that this is really one of those moments. This is the last moment, I think, in the history of the internet where the majority of data and information we interact with does not have some layer of AI creation in it. Going forward, I think that all content and all information, and actually all kind of human intelligent and creative output will have a layer of AI creation in it. This is the reason why, and of course, Stelios was already discussing this, but there has been a huge pivot in the last 6 months since ChatGPT was released that has seen all of big tech reorient to make generative AI a strategic part of their operations. And the first mover was Microsoft. We heard about Microsoft's relationship with OpenAI. They had already had a $1 billion investment in OpenAI. And soon after ChatGPT came out, that was increased to another $10 billion. And ChatGPT was integrated into Bing. It was integrated into the most popular operating system in the world. How much of the world is it 70% of the world uses Microsoft's OS? Is that the market share? So again, being put in front of hundreds of millions of people, and this happened in a matter of months, right? ChatGPT came out at the end of November last year. By February, you have Mr. Nadella, obviously one of the most luminary and important business people in the world, coming out with public statements where he's saying, hey, Google, your dominance in search is over because we're integrating ChatGPT into Bing, and now we have a new vision for how search is going to work. We're going to make you dance. Those were his words by February 2023. But it isn't only Microsoft. All of the other big tech companies in the last 6 months, again, since ChatGPT came out, have fundamentally reoriented towards generative AI. You have Google's kind of famous code red issued after Microsoft was kind of first off the bat, first to the races, if you will. They bought or they made a $300 million investment into Anthropic, which is a company developing LLMs similar to the GPT series from OpenAI. They're deploying generative AI into all of their products and services. They have fundamentally restructured DeepMind and Google Brain to make a new AI super unit called Google DeepMind. All of this, again, in the past 6 months. By the way, Anthropic, this company which was created to challenge OpenAI's dominance in LLMs, has already raised since January $1 billion in investment. So the generative AI market is hot, so to speak. Not only Google, not only Facebook, Meta. They also, I mean, it's a bit of a shame that they didn't wait a little longer before rebranding to Meta. Had they waited to 2022, they'd probably just be called AI. They have a new generative AI research unit, and they've been actually releasing foundational models open source, in the belief that actually we may lose some control, but if we release our foundational models open source, they're going to be more integrated into the ecosystem, so we're going to have more impact and influence that long-term that way. They're actually already creating generative AI for their products and services, so AI-generated ads are coming this year. Amazon is doing the same. Obviously, AWS is a huge player in this space. They have a partnership with Hugging Face. Hugging Face is one of the flourishing, most vibrant open source communities around generative AI. They have a generative AI accelerator, and they also have their Bedrock platform, which is their generative AI kind of platform, which they also launched all of this in the last 6 months. But it's not only big tech. So you've seen this fundamental reorientation by big tech, but one of the other things that's happening, which is actually going to dominate this space, is just how quickly open source is developing and catching up. Because we're starting to come to the realization that these models, bigger is not always better. So these kind of foundational models that have been created by some of the big tech companies that are incredibly expensive to do. OpenAI ran a loss of almost $600 million last year because of the computes and the research, and these big models are incredibly expensive. But now there's an understanding that once you have this base of these big foundational models, you can build smaller models on top of that to iterate, to be used for different enterprise use cases. So bigger is not always better, especially when you start looking at bespoke use cases you want to fine-tune. And there was even a leaked Google memo which came out, I think it was now last month, although it's hard to keep pace with how quickly generative AI is moving, that kind of suggested that, oh my God, whilst we're here worrying about Microsoft and OpenAI, it's actually open source that's coming to eat our lunch. So all of these trends mean that the market is moving so quickly, and I think it's unprecedented to see this scale of innovation, interest, and money flowing into a space again, all kicked off really starting 6 months ago. So the AI arms race is on. And broadly, it's because everybody, if you think about the generative AI tech stack, everybody wants to own a piece of this tech stack. You have the kind of infrastructure piece, which is the GPUs and cloud. This is your AWS, Azure, GPUs. Anybody seen NVIDIA stock recently? Well, Mr. Jensen, very visionary CEO, shall we say. Then the next layer is the kind of platform, right? So these are the foundational models, which again, as I already mentioned, is not only owned by the big tech companies. Open source is really competing on this level as well. And then finally, you have the application layer on top of that. And the application layer is just exploding because, as has immediately become apparent, when I started tracking this with deepfakes all the way back in 2017, we were thinking about this as a vehicle for creation, right? Especially creation of visual content. But it's much more than that. The utility is instruction. It's efficiency for businesses. This is automating or expediting your workflows. It's also about entertainment. And here you have infographic just displaying some of the companies that are coming up in this space, most of which did not exist 12 months ago. Like I said, I've been tracking the space for 5-6 years. These are all new, and you can see in their capabilities. It's generative AI companies focused on video generation, chatbots, data, gaming, search, ML platforms, audio, image, you name it. Every type of human creative or intelligent activity augmented by AI. Which is why, according to early estimates, the generative AI space is going to be worth $200 billion by 2030. Now, I actually think it's going to be worth a heck of a lot more than that, because once you start thinking about the applications across every industry, the mind simply boggles. Right now, and you might be having these conversations within your own companies, from the initial, whoa, what's happening phase, all of enterprise is now starting to think, how do we make this work for us? And just by show of hands, who's had these conversations in your workplace? Okay, now that's incredible. Again, given that ChatGPT, which was kind of the lightning rod, shall we say, for this entire perception shifting, only came out 6 months ago. So think of it as like a GPTU. And Bloomberg was one of the first companies that said, you know what, we're going to build our own version of ChatGPT, Bloomberg GPT, which is just going to be trained on all our financial data, which is unique and bespoke to our use cases internally and for our clients. But of course, not everybody has the amount of data that Bloomberg has, nor the resources to create their own version, their own foundational model. So whilst you can build your own, the realization now with enterprise, and this is of course what Stelios is talking about, is that you can fine-tune base models. And a key question on this is, how do you do this while protecting your proprietary data? Because for your use case, the most value you're going to get is when you can fine-tune a model with your own proprietary data. And whilst there have been some early mishaps, shall we say, people just throwing stuff into ChatGPT, I think it was some Samsung proprietary designs, and that was kind of leaked. Already the market is forming where the services, Stelios just remarked upon it, where you have access to these models and your proprietary data is safe, right? Because I think all of big tech understands that that is a massive potential market. So the question now is, as an enterprise, is how do you make it work for you? But again, stepping back just more broadly, what does this all mean? I think that when you think of generative AI, really, you can conceive of it as almost a combustion engine for all content creation, for all communication, and all knowledge work. If you think of the revolutions of the past 30 years, the internet, cloud computing, smartphone, I think that this is bigger than all of them. Not least because the digital and physical infrastructure for this revolution to unfold is already in place. Again, that is exemplified by how quickly ChatGPT changed the conversation and how quickly now enterprise use cases for generative AI across the spectrum are starting to develop. Again, everything all in the past 6 months. To give you a sense of kind of how profound these changes might be, one early study from the University of Pennsylvania and OpenAI suggested that 80% of the US workforce could be affected by LLMs. Now, LLMs are, again, only one type of generative model. Now, that's not to say that AI is going to take 80% of jobs, but does it mean that there is disruption ahead in the labor market, that there is change, and that AI is going to change the way we work? Absolutely. Kind of tied to that, and you might have, everybody's been following the media debate on AI, right? And it seems that every week or every month we have a new letter signed by luminaries and leaders warning about the existential risks of AI, right? Warning about the scenario, the so-called AGI or superintelligence scenario, the point where AI is so intelligent that it takes control and we humans lose control, and it's an existential risk, it wipes us out. One of those letters came out in March, although there was a new one just last week, and it was signed by the likes of Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak. Now, just after Elon signed the letter, he simultaneously was buying as many GPUs as he could get his hands on and launching his own version of ChatGPT called TruthGPT. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions as to why he might have signed that letter. But the point is this. A lot of the debate right now is punctuated by fear, and mostly this most extreme example of AI is going to kill us all. Now, that is hypothetically possible, but do I think that that is the risk we should be concerned about now? Absolutely not. It is an existential risk that deserves consideration, but if you look at the systems and models right now, we are nowhere near, in my view, superintelligence or AGI. And I think that this reductive narrative of AI is going to kill us all, this is an existential risk, is quite harmful and pernicious, not least because it takes agency out of our hands, right? It's being deployed in enterprises. You're going to have massive productivity wins and gains within enterprise. But of course, as society kind of navigates this new age of AI, having this kind of harmful vision of the AI killer bots is, I think, really, really reductive and harmful. So very concretely then, because I know that you all will be considering within the context of your businesses how and what you should be doing. Here are 3 of my top recommendations for don'ts. So as you start considering the AI revolution and generative AI, it really matters that you don't have undefined goals. Think about your company, your use cases, define the goals and objectives where you think AI could help you. Don't limit your perspective of generative AI, right? It's not only chatbots, it's not only ChatGPT. As Stelios already highlighted, and what I'm also saying is that it relates to every form of information, knowledge creation, generation, whether that's audio, video, imagery. It's not only chatbots, so the applications are vast and can be interpreted as being an augmenting force, like I said, for every bit of human creative and intelligent work. And don't get stuck on your model choices. Your model choices are important, whether you go with OpenAI's API, whether you decide to go with an open source model, but it's not the be-all and end-all. Do's. Do embrace the technology now. This has been developing for quite a few years now, and we're definitely at the stage where the enterprise applications are realizing. So if you're an early adopter, you will definitely gain a competitive edge. I just chaired a 2-day conference, actually in London 2 weeks ago, which was the first kind of enterprise conference for generative AI, and I was struck by the breadth and depth of use cases across industries, right? From the guy, that's the NASA engineer, who's using generative AI to design component parts of spaceships, a process that used to take years and years and years, now distilled down to months and, days and hours, in his own words, to the guys from financial services who are thinking of using a ChatGPT-like product to give financial advice to their clients on like mortgages, interest rates, savings. So embrace the tech now. Do establish a generative AI working group. And it shouldn't just be the tech people in your company. This should be C-suite and a variety of people across the company, and prioritize your initiatives. So yes, there are some short-term wins to be had, but the more long-term and strategic you are about this, because this revolution is here to stay, the better it will fare you in the long term. And finally, I guess, just on this question, which is going to become so political, right? Because this isn't only going to be about enterprise wins and 10xing your company. Of course, that is going to be one of the hugest gains for early adopters. But this is going to become this huge societal question, because we're talking about the automation of workflows within white-collar work for the first time. So this question of, is the AI going to augment or automate me? And there's a very interesting podcast which recently came out where Steve Jobs, obviously long gone Steve Jobs, and the podcaster Joe Rogan were discussing exactly this. Let's have a listen.
It will be interesting to see what happens when you have computers that are as smart as people, but much more reliable. They won't get tired, they won't get sick, they won't go on vacation and leave work unfinished. You tell them to do something, they'll just do it. And they will have many more orders of intelligence than people have. The computer will be 1,000 times more important than it is today. We're right on the edge of that. So what do we want to do about it? Do we want to just ride the wave or do something else?
It kind of scares me, to be honest.
It should scare you. But it is also really cool. That's the best way I can describe it. It's really, really cool.
That's the good news and the bad news. It's both.
Yeah. That's how most of life is, though. If it was just awesome, it wouldn't be balanced by something else.
So it's really scary, but it's also really, really cool. And scary because of the scale of the disruption ahead, and scary because there's no doubt, my own background is in geopolitics, that it will be weaponized by bad actors, but really, really cool because of the potential abundance and the potential innovation that's going to be heralded by the AI revolution. Now, in the plot twist that no one saw coming, that is obviously an AI-generated conversation. It never actually happened. Ultimately, beyond kind of the enterprise use cases for AI, this is such a profound moment for humanity, because AI is going to change what it means to be human in our lifetimes and the lifetimes of our children in the next few generations. We're about to experience more exponential tech-led change than the entirety of humanity that came before us. So it's a really profound moment to be alive, and we absolutely, like I said, have the agency to decide how this technology is going to be integrated into the framework of society. I happen to think it's the most fascinating story of our time, so please feel free to join my community and my newsletter of over 100,000 people. We call it the Era of Generative AI, where we track this story as it unfolds.